Well, Dale Marshall is the National Climate Program Manager for Environmental Defence here in Canada. We have reached him at the Climate Summit in New York. Dale Marshall, good to see you again. Thanks for taking time to speak with me.
Good to talk to you, Peter.
We saw this very emotional condemnation of world leaders by teenage activist Greta Thunberg today, accusing them of betraying young people, of stealing her dreams and her childhood. What effect do you think that message will have?
Well, I hope it has a strong impact. It certainly made me quite emotional to hear her pleading with the world to do something, saying essentially, "Don't give me your hope. Don't applaud me because I'm here. We need action, and we need strong action now." And essentially saying the truth, which is that it's her generation that's going to be suffering from our inaction if we continue to not take this seriously. The problem of climate change, that is.
Yeah, I guess obviously very blunt spoken, not typically what you hear at the United Nations. They're all pretty easy on each other. Do you get a sense at all that this could be a pivotal moment? How much weight is she carrying in this conversation?
Well, I mean, I think she has. She's pointing people towards the moral imperative to act, to protect species, to protect her future. And if that doesn't have an impact on people who are decision makers, who are actually able to do the things that are needed in terms of reducing emissions and dealing in a real way with the problem that we have, that we confront ourselves with, that we're confronted with, which is an existential crisis, especially for her generation. If those pleas don't have any impact, then it's hard to believe. I think it will propel action amongst a lot of people who are thinking about this issue and are in positions of making decisions.
Yeah, and so much of these decisions are based on pressure from the public, right? So if people find a connection to her and the message, then you get this ground up push to the political leaders. But let's go back to the goal of this UN Climate Summit. What was it called for? What's it supposed to achieve?
Well, it was the Secretary General of the UN who wanted to have greater momentum towards next year, where countries are expected to increase their climate action, to commit to more action, to commit to greater emission reductions. It was always going to be piecemeal because it's only like countries that wanted to make new announcements were the only ones who were going to be given the stage. Right. So it wasn't intended to be every country stepping forward together. But this, over the course of the next year now, will hopefully establish some momentum towards every country deciding that they're going to do more to fight climate action.
So have any countries stepped up?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a number of announcements that were pretty interesting. The Finnish Prime Minister came and said that Finland will be carbon neutral by 2033. So, that's barely a decade away. It's a huge announcement. Small island developing states, this is dozens of small island states in the Caribbean and in South Pacific, have all said that they want to be at 100% renewable energy by 2030. So to have no fossil fuels be powering their economies. And these are poor countries, but they're also at the forefront of climate change, which is why you see them stepping up and taking strong action.
Okay, I want to get to the Canadian conversation in a moment, but just on one last thing on today. The U.S. President Donald Trump popped into the summit. I see where it was for about 14 minutes. What do you make of his presence there when he wasn't expected to show up at all? And he's viewed in a lot of circles as someone who's a climate denier, but he popped in today. Do you wonder why?
I think he was facing a lot of criticism for not even showing up. And so I guess to appease the people who have been criticizing him, he feels like makes a difference for him to sit down and for 15 minutes and hear a couple of speeches. I mean, obviously, what we need more than anything from President Trump is greater action from the U.S. He's been rolling back regulations in the U.S., whether it has to do with methane emissions from oil and gas or vehicle standards and for efficiency and carbon emissions. So he's been trying to roll stuff back and actually facing a lot of opposition from the states, and even from companies. But that's what he needs to do more than anything. Whether he's in his chair for 15 minutes or 15 hours doesn't really matter that much. It's clearly just a tokenistic kind of action today.
Okay, our Prime Minister isn't there because we're in the middle of an election campaign in this country, but given the guidelines that the Secretary General set, you're not going to get a chance to come to the microphone unless you got a new plan and you're willing to sort of up your game. So Canada's not there because of the election, but would we have been invited to the microphone even if we were there?
Well, Canada would have had to be ready to increase its climate action, to make greater commitments in the future. We're still expecting that for next year. There are now 65 countries and counting who have said that they're going to increase the pledge that they have under the Paris Agreement to take greater action on climate change. I'm hopeful that no matter who the government is next year, that we will do that we will decide to take greater action, make greater commitments in terms of both carbon reductions, as well as assisting poor countries to help them address climate change.
How should what happens this week in New York, and we have climate strikes in Canadian cities coming up at the end of the week on Friday, what is the message to political leaders in this country facing questions about this on the campaign trail right now?
Well, I mean, it's clear there's a public appetite for greater action from citizens. 4 million people in 100 plus countries were in the streets on Friday, and we're going to see a very big display similar in Canada with dozens of cities across the country who are going to have climate strike marches. And so I think the message is very clear that and we've seen in terms of the discussion in this election, citizens want action, and they're seeing it in much more urgent terms than they have in a while. Maybe that's because of the impacts, the wildfires, the floods, maybe it's because of the new science, but Canadian citizens want to see action. And so any party that wants to form government and lead Canada over the next 4 years better be ready to step into that role of being a greater climate leader.
Okay, Dale Marshall, National Climate Program Manager for Environmental Defence in Canada, joining us from the Climate Summit in New York today. Thanks for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.